Taking 3 deep breaths and checking our posture. Releasing with each out breath any tensions, any pains or discomforts. Finding that posture in which we can relax, find stillness and vigilance. Release all concerns, all worries, hopes and fears, and come to rest in the present moment. Set your motivation for this practice. Make it as meaningful as possible. Now let's count 21 breaths while keeping that sense of relaxing deeper and deeper. Without controlling the breath, without modifying it, just noticing it. Now release the counting and continue present, relaxed, attentive. Now we are going to imagine our death. First, imagine a circumstance in which you are dying. Imagine, visualize where you are. How are you dying? Anything that comes to mind is okay. It's just an exercise. Visualize the reactions of your friends and family. How do you feel about dying? What is happening in your mind? Now the dissolutions of the death process are starting. The element earth is dissolving. And the external sign is that your body becomes very thin. Limbs are loose. And a sense that the body is sinking under the earth. The aggregate of form is dissolving. The limbs are becoming smaller. The body is becoming weak and powerless. Your sight becomes unclear and dark. One cannot open or close eyes. The luster of the body diminishes. One's strength is consumed. The basic mirror-like wisdom is dissolving. And the internal sign is a mirage-like vision. Now the second dissolution has begun. It's the water element that is dissolving. Saliva, sweat, urine, blood, and regenerative fluid are drying. It's the aggregate of feelings. The body consciousness can no longer experience the three types of feelings accompanying the mental consciousness. The basic wisdom of equality. One is no longer mindful of the three types of feeling. Is the ear sense. One no longer hears external or internal sounds. All the sounds are dissolving. And the internal perception is like a smoke-like vision. Now the fire element is beginning to dissolve. One cannot digest food and drink. It's the aggregate of discrimination. One is no longer mindful of the affairs of close persons. It's the basic wisdom of analysis. One can no longer remember the names of close persons. It's the nose sense. The inhalation is weak. The exhalation is strong and lengthy. One cannot smell. The internal sign is a vision like sparks of fire, similar. Now the fourth dissolution has begun. It's the wind element. The 10 winds move to the heart. Breathing ceases. This is the time where modern medicine says we are dead, clinically dead. There's no breathing. But there are still 4 more internal dissolutions. Right now is the fourth. It's the wind element. It's the aggregate of compositional factors. One cannot perform physical actions. It's the basic wisdom of achieving activities. One is no longer mindful of external worldly activities, purposes, and so forth. It's the tongue sense. The tongue becomes thick and short. The root of the tongue becomes blue. It's the sense of the taste. One cannot experience taste. It's the body sense and tangible objects. One cannot experience smoothness and roughness. And the internal sign is like a dull light. This time, we're clinically dead. Now we start experiencing the 4 next dissolutions. It's the 5th dissolution, the aethic conceptions. The winds in right and left channels above heart enter the central channel at the top of the head. The internal vision is like a clear vacuity filled with white light. Like a white landscape at dawn. Then the sixth dissolution is where the winds in right and left channels below the heart enter the central channel at the base of the spine. The inner experience, the internal sign, is a very clear vacuity filled with red light. Like the sky of a sunset. Then comes the seventh dissolution. The upper and lower winds gather at the heart. Then winds enter drop at the heart. The experience is like a vacuity filled with thick darkness. As if swooning unconsciously. And then the eighth dissolution is the mind of black near attainment. All winds dissolve into the very subtle life-bearing wind, in the indestructible drop at the heart chakra. The experience is of a very clear vacuity, the mind of the clear light of death. This time, our consciousness leaves the body and continues its journey. Now ask yourself, given that I will die one day, what is important in my life? Feel your body again manifesting in this body at this moment. And think of what is really important. What do I feel good about having done? What do I regret? What do I want to do and to avoid doing while I am alive? What can I do to prepare for death? What are my priorities in life? Feel the importance of making your life meaningful. Make specific conclusions about what you want to do and to avoid doing from now on. Let's finish dedicating this practice so we can continue gaining insight into impermanence and death and use our meaningful lives in the best possible way. Cultivate the causes for genuine happiness, for enlightenment, to alleviate the suffering in the world. Stretch a little bit, move your body. So the more we do this meditation on death, both the one we did in the morning and this one, the more understanding we have about not only that this time will come, but that we need to prepare for it. And in Buddhism, there's a very detailed description about the whole process, all the stages, everything that we will experience. So if we familiarize with these dissolutions, when they arise at the moment of death, we will experience less fear because we know what's coming next. And we will recognize these signs and it won't be as disconcerting. But we can also start preparing now and before the moments before dying in kind of fixing and taking care of all our affairs, leaving clear instructions to our loved ones about what we want during that time, or give away our possessions so that we can die without attachments. And there's several texts describing advice on how to deal with this, how to support other people that are dying. There is the Tibetan Book of the Dead that also includes some practices that you can do for the people that already died and to guide them on that process so that they're not so confused. There's another very good book called the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche, which is a controversial teacher that recently was involved in a scandal. But the book is really good. Some people say he wrote it, some people say one of his disciples wrote it, but it has a clear explanation of these teachings and how we can help others in that process. And then there's many other books. I think there's one by the Dalai Lama, by Gyatro Rinpoche. There's many texts about dying and how to die consciously. So if we practice during life, we can do something at different levels, right? But one of the things we can do if we practice, for example, Shamatha practice, and we are present, we can be present during that process of dissolution and mindful of the whole process, and maybe even travel it or traverse it consciously. What usually happens after this near black attainment is that the mind enters into a blackout and you enter into a subconsciousness, like an unconscious state, and then 3 days later you wake up and you're in a dreamlike state that is called the bardo. Bardo means interstate. It's a state between other two states. And you can perceive your house, your relatives, but they can't perceive you. And you are kind of in a dream-like body, right? But if you enter lucidly a process, then you could achieve enlightenment at that very moment, because your Buddha nature arises very clearly. All the grasping, all the mental afflictions are dissolved, the confusion, and for a moment, if you can identify that Buddha nature and stabilize that recognition, then you can become enlightened, or at least have some inherence in what's coming next and direct your travel to the next rebirth, right? And you can also die doing Tonglen meditation, like wishing all beings be free of suffering and seeking loving kindness. So practicing that way is very virtuous. You're putting seeds of virtue. The mental state with which we die is very important for what is coming next. So we want to die as peaceful as possible and have good aspirations, right? And then we can have a community of friends, of Dharma friends, ideally, that help us practice and that help us in those moments when we cannot practice anymore, but they can remind us the teachings, they can practice for us, and they can practice even after our death. So recently I had the fortune of being accompanying or supporting a friend in this process. She was part of a community of friends that we have of Dharma practitioners that we've been in many retreats and teachings together, travels in India and Thailand, different Asian countries, and she was diagnosed with cancer, And she immediately called the closest Dharma friends and asked us to support her. So we were meeting weekly for several months, practicing together and reminding her of all the practices she has to do in the moment, right? And particularly, we were doing a particular practice called Powa, which is called the transference of consciousness. This is a tantric secret practice. I cannot tell you in detail because you need to have it as in a context of a power retreat with a lineage holder that is transmitting you that practice. But basically, Powa. Powa. So when a practitioner achieves enlightenment, when a bodhisattva becomes a Buddha, they can manifest what is called Buddha realms or Buddha lands. Just as we have these samsaric realms that we create with our minds, a Buddha can create a conducive environment. It's not that it's inherently existent outside of us, but he can manifest his appearance for the benefit of beings he or she, or there's no gender, right? But there's a particular Buddha, his name is Amitabha, and the story says that he did a lot of prayers when he was a monk, a practitioner, during several lives. He did this aspiration that when he achieved enlightenment, he wanted to create a pure land where everybody could be born. Usually it's known in the tantric tradition that you can only take birth there if you have very advanced realizations in the bodhisattva path. You cannot access that if you're an ordinary sentient being full with mental afflictions, right, and still with so much karma. But due to his aspirations, there is that possibility of taking rebirth in his Pure Land. And he said the only requirement is that you want to be, that you believe is possible and that you want to take rebirth there. That's what the Amitabha Sutra, Mahayana Sutra says, right? But many people say, I don't believe it, so they won't make the aspiration, so they won't have the karmic seed to go there, right? So there's a specific practice to facilitate a process. And Ayan Rinpoche, one of my teachers, he is a lineage holder of this Powa tradition. He gives an annual retreat in Bodh Gaya. I don't know if he's still doing it, but he used to do the Powa retreat in Bodh Gaya. And he is a manifestation of the Buddha Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite light. And this is interesting because some Japanese scientists, they did some tests on him. They put some electrodes, they were measuring his brain activity. And they detected that when he was in meditation, manifesting as Amitabha, manifesting the Amitabha mandala, the brain activity changed very much in comparison to when he was just manifesting as an ordinary person. He is a great compassionate being, right? So he gave us, many of us, he gave us this practice, he instructed us in how to do it. And so we were meeting and doing this practice with my friend, and she was preparing all these months in what to do, setting up all her affairs so that her daughters would have like a easier transition or acceptance of the process. We meditated with her family. we explained them because they were not Buddhist practitioners, but we explained they were very open to everything that could help her, of course. She was living very near my house, so I would go meet with them, and the other friends, they were connecting from different parts online, and we set up music of mantras in her room and fill it with flowers, and we would come, people would come say goodbye and visit her, and we would do meditations with her. So it was a very beautiful process. We learned a lot from her attitude. She was a very good practitioner, and I witnessed all these dissolutions, right, as she was entering. These dissolutions can last longer or shorter depending on the person and the situation. They can last a few days or a few hours. They can happen very fast. If you, for example, die in a car accident, they will happen very fast. So if you die from an illness, you might have more time to prepare. But anyways, we have to start preparing from now, right? Because we don't know when it's going to happen. And so after she passed away, we continue meeting and doing for 49 days. That is the time that in the Buddhist tradition, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they said it takes up to 49, it can be less, but it takes up to 49 days to take your new rebirth. So we were meeting all these weeks on the same day, at the same hour she passed away, because that's when you're in the bardo, you experience like the whole process of dissolution again, like a mini death inside the bardo. So there's these opportunities of recognizing the Buddha nature and achieving enlightenment. So we were doing these practices week by week, and we formed a nice community. Like, we saw how beautiful it was to support someone, and we all want to be supported when we die. So we said, let's keep this connection and let's keep helping each other, right? And so it's important to talk with your friends, your Dharma friends, and if you can, write down important things like, what would you like, if you're in a critical situation, would you like to be resuscitated, or you prefer not, or you prefer to die in a hospital, or if there's nothing left to do, you prefer to be transferred to your home and die in your home. Like, each one of us might want different things, and the more you know about your loved ones, what they want and what you want, tell them what you want, the easier that process will be, right? My mom took the POA retreat with us and many Dharma teachings, and when she passed away a couple of years ago, she left written everything she wanted. She wrote down that she wanted us to meet and meditate, and the whole family, right? That they were also not Buddhist practitioners. My brother is a Buddhist practitioner, and my aunt, and so the three of us organized the meditations and kind of teach them the mantras and everything. And at that time, the family is more open, right? At other times they might say, no, I'm not interested in Buddhism or in retreats or anything. But at that time, there's an openness. So they all were wanting to practice, and that was a very healing rituals that we did together, right? So she gave us so much instructions. She left everything so organized with her documents and her will and everything, that for us it was a very easy transition, and we were very grateful that she wrote down all of this. So it's important to tell your loved ones what you like, because at some point you might be dying and not be able to speak or communicate, and they might just take decisions that of things you don't want. So it's also important to designate a person that you trust and that you know they will make sure that your wishes are fulfilled. So say, if I can't speak or communicate, I want this person to take the decisions for me, you know? And so during the next 3 days after your death, it's important that, or the death of a loved one, that we don't do a lot of legal stuff and kind of giving the things away, because, not the next 3 days. The 3 days are kind of unconscious, so you might be able to do some arrangements, but the following 49 days, the person might still be coming to the place that is familiar, to the house or the relatives, and might want to see what's going on with their things. And if they see they're just giving them away or fighting for them or something like that, that can disturb the person that is experiencing and processing, because you might be in that state and not know that you have died, and have these reactions still, and emotional entanglements arising right there. So it's important during those 49 days to kind of leave all these things as they are, kind of put a pause on all the necessary paperwork or things, and just focus on practicing and sending a lot of loving kindness and compassion to that person. And then after 49 days, start doing all the other arrangements, right? Of course, this is not always possible, but if you can wait some time, it's good. And also, I forgot to mention, when the person is dying, it's recommended not to touch the body. And if it's necessary to touch them up, ideally the head, or somewhere in the top first, because where you touch, the consciousness is the attention and consciousness is gonna go there. So if you touch the feet, then it's more chance that the consciousness will exit through the lower apertures, and that might take to an unfortunate rebirth. And if it exits through the upper orifices, it might help take a best rebirth. And also the tradition, particularly the Tibetan tradition, speaks about not touching the body, because great practitioners do a special kind of meditation during the process of dying. So they died in the sitting posture, many of them, or in the lion posture, and they are able to maintain that consciousness, that samadhi of dying, without exiting the body for several days or weeks or even months. And this is happening to this day. There are cases, they're documented by doctors. There's still practitioners having this meditation on the clear light. It means they have recognized that Buddha nature, or they already recognize it in their life, they're just sustaining it, right? So it's the best meditation. And they remain without decomposing. The body smells good, it smells like flowers. And there's an inner heat. There's this area of the chest is warm, is holding the heat. So the body is still fresh for several days or even months. And in some special cases, some practitioners have achieved what in the Dzogchen tradition is known the rainbow body. So there's different kinds of rainbow body. But basically it means that they are enlightened. They have transformed all the material constituents of the body into space. So the body starts shrinking with proportion, and it can become very small, right? In Tibet, they had some of these teachers in small shape remaining in special places in the monasteries. Now, that's one kind of rainbow body where the body just shrinks and stays little. There's another one where they dissolve completely and they just leave hair and nails. And there's a case of this that happened in Tibet when the Chinese invasion, and he was a prisoner, and he was in his cell, and he said, well, I'm going to use it as a retreat, and just meditated all that he learned, and he achieved the rainbow body. So when the guards came and opened the cell, there was only hair and nails left, because he just dissolved into space. Now, some students of these great practitioners, when they see the bodies shrinking, they rush to make the cremation of the body, because when there is a cremation of these great beings, they leave what is called relics. And they can be like little pearls. They can be bones that have mantras carved. There's different things. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, for example, this great master that lived in the 20th century, his tongue and his heart didn't burn, were there, left. So they have them in a special place. And if you're lucky, if you go to his monastery in Nepal, you can not see them, but they're in a little box in the shrine, and you can meditate in front of these relics. In the Kopan monastery, they have a room full of relics of these great masters from the times of the Buddha. They have relics of the Buddha, of Atisha, of Milarepa, of all these practitioners. They're actually, Lama Zopa organized, there was a tour, a world tour, bringing these relics to different countries and showing them to people. It's funny because when they came to Mexico, there were lines and lines of people coming to see the relics, and they felt this devotion, this openness. And Lama Zopa was very impressed. He said that these people have a lot of natural devotion, right? Even though they are more Catholic, they were very open to this idea. And so if you go to that monastery, Kopan, you can see them, and there is just some blessings you receive for seeing them, right? But some of the students kind of take some parts, like hair or something, they put it in a yeah. So the stupas, these monuments, they also contain some relics of great teachers. And well, that's the other kind of rainbow body. And there's one very special one that is called the Great Transference Rainbow Body. And that's the one that Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche, manifested. And he just said, okay, beloved people, I'm leaving, right? He just basically disappeared into space. And then he was appearing somewhere else, and he just transcended death completely. He can withdraw the appearance into space and manifest it whenever he he wants, right? And then, of course, many Buddhist teachers talk about Jesus as being a bodhisattva because these achievements are not exclusively Buddhist. I mean, it's the potential we have, right? And so there's some books that speak about this. Thich Nhat Hanh has one, and the Dalai Lama also has spoken about this. That Jesus probably was someone that had great realization, right? Like a bodhisattva. And there's even some people that say that he might achieved this kind of rainbow body, that he was able to die and then manifest. Again, that's when the story says that he appeared days later after his death. They call it resurrection, right? But the thing is that still to this day, there are teachers dwelling in this clear light. Recently, one of my teachers, Chokling Rinpoche, from the monastery of the White Gompa in Nepal, he passed away. He was in this state, I think, for a month or something. There's the stories of these great yogis. There's a video on the internet you might be able to find where other of my teachers, Sokni Rinpoche, actually the brother of Chokling Rinpoche, he is with a tulku, with a practitioner that died in this state and was remaining in the clear death. And he allowed that this was recorded and explains, and he even shows you his hand, his skin, and says, look, he's in this state right now. And we hear about these teachers all the time here in Nepal and India and these nearby countries, right? So it's not uncommon. And that would be a great way of going, right? If you can die practicing and sustain that recognition and achieve the rainbow body, that would be really great. So I wanted just to mention that there is that possibility, and there is people doing it. There was another recent case of she was a Western nun, and she practically lived and traveled for many years here in India and Nepal and these nearby countries. But at some point she was old and she was not feeling very healthy, physically very well. So she went to the UK and she went to a monastery. I think it was Shamatha in Scotland. I'm not sure, but one monastery in the UK, and she decided to kind of settle there. And the community was very supportive with her, and they just thought, this is such a nice, kind woman. What a great practitioner. She's practiced all her life. But they just thought she's like an ordinary person, right? And she wouldn't show off about her realizations or anything. She was just very kind to everybody and hanging out there in the monastery. And when she passed away, she actually remained in the clear light of death for several days. And then everybody was like, oh, I wish I had known. Then I would have had taken the opportunity of talk more with this great practitioner, right? But nobody knew. So there's many cases also of great practitioners that they just look like quite ordinary, and they're secret practitioners. But in the tradition is known that You shouldn't show off of your realizations, but at the moment of dying, it's okay. You can display your realization. So, yeah, there's many wonderful stories about great practitioners. So all this topic about dying is not to get us depressed or sad. It can be very intense if you meditate and you're dead and meditate again and again. It can be quite, you can get into a heavy mental state. So do a lot of love and compassion for yourself, for others, empathetic joy, equanimity. All these practices of the heart help us uplift and see them that the point is to live a meaningful life, not to get sad about impermanence, okay? It's a process of accepting. So do you have any questions?
When your friend passed away,
Yeah.
Was she able to do poa because she died?
Well, at the very moment of her death, she was basically sleeping. But she did it a lot before, until the last lucid time. And when someone is dying and they notify you, they pass away. So the daughters called me immediately when they saw it was happening. I went to the house. I connected immediately with all our community. We were all ready, waiting for the moment. And then we start doing the practice for her, So you do the poa, and by doing that, you are assisted in the process. And then when a few days later, you do it, and they are in the bardo, there's a connection of the mind. The mind can read them. You can read the minds of other people and hear them. But they say it's incremented. Your abilities, your wisdom, your understanding is incremented. So even if it's someone that never practiced, if you do practices for them or explain them, there's more chance they will get it. Because there's no so much veils of confusion and reification. So we did the practice for her, and then there are teachers that have great realization and can perform the practice also for you and kind of do the poa for you, send you to the Amita Pure Land, right? And so our teacher in Mexico was doing the practice for her. I sent a message to Ayan Rinpoche, and his assistant told me she would pass the message. We did also some donations. There are some monasteries in Nepal, India, where they do certain pujas for helping people in the process, and so you can kind of ask that these rituals be done for the person, and the merit is dedicated for the process. So we did that, and I mean, you do all you can to support. But in the moment, if you're not lucid and conscious, and you might not be able to do it, but you don't know. Maybe the body was sleeping, but she was conscious, and she was doing it. So, because it's a mental practice, even if your body's without moving, you can still practice. But we tried to do everything we could to help her in that process. Anything else? Any other question? Yeah.
I'm trying to understand reincarnation and non-self. So I have a quick metaphor, which maybe is my way of trying to understand it. So is the stream of Buddha nature of everything kind of like a head of infinite hair, and then each strand of hair is like your personal strand of consciousness, but then each lifetime is like a cell of the hair. Because I'm confused how we can have a consciousness that continues, but also there's no self. So I'm trying, but then you explained the other day how it's not like you just jump into another body. There's like kind of like something butts up against the other. So is my metaphor close?
It could be. So, first, we don't call it reincarnation because that is kind of implying that yourself is embodied in a new body. Like it's more like this process of bringing the self into the other body. It's more rebirth. I think that word explains better than reincarnation.
Okay.
So, as you said, it's a continuity, right? It's like you are today, you're not the same you were yesterday, but there's a continuity, right? So we could put the label is you, but it's just a label because you have been transformed from yesterday to today. And then from today to the next lifetime, there will be a transformation. But there's a relative continuum of experience, flow of experience that seems to be your individual stream and his stream. So we could say, instead of hairs, I think I would use the metaphor of rivers because the water is flowing, it's less static. You can visualize that movement. So each one of us are like rivers, individual rivers, right? And we can label them. And this is this river, this is this other river, this is this other river. Yet, if they were all to connect at some point and eventually lead to the ocean, you could say they're carrying the same water. The water is the same, right? But at the same time, you can say each one of them is individual. And at the same time you're labeling, you cannot pinpoint to the river. Because if you say, this is a river, you may touch one drop of water, but then that drop is gone, and the river is still there. You can still perceive the river, but you cannot find the self of the river. See? So that self is just a label we put, but it's a flow. So awareness is this consciousness, this substrate consciousness that passes from life to life to life, infinitely. It's this ever-transforming flow of experience. So when we do this practice of looking at awareness, it's not like there's something solid there that you can extract and identify and say, this is awareness, right? Yet there is experience. So this can only be understood really if you observe awareness, right? Because no matter how many explanations or concepts or labels we put, we cannot grasp it with the conceptual mind. The mind wants to hold into it exists or it doesn't exist. It's permanent or it's impermanent. You see? We want to hold on to a definition. So
what imprint or knowledge of one life is carried over to the next? This awareness as it flows from, let's say, the birth you said, right? So what imprint or what is carried over? Knowledge.
what imprint?
Yeah, of this life, let's say.
Yeah, all your actions, and particularly the motivation which you did the action is gonna carry. We talk about seeds that are stored in that consciousness, right? But it's just a way of speaking. It's not like they're really things putting in there. So we also call them imprints, mental imprints. So this continuum is like a flow of information. It's carrying that information of what you did in this life and what you've done in previous lives. And each one of our actions will give rise to a consequence. It has a potential of manifesting as a consequence, right? But it's not inherently existence. That's why we can purify karma. If it was inherent, no matter what we do, we cannot purify it. Yet, if it's too late and the conditions are starting to come together for it to ripen, no matter what you do, it's gonna manifest. So through certain practices you can reduce the impact. But if you don't do anything and you have this force that you created with one action, it's like it will continue like a vector. It will continue until it manifests. But if you don't put an opposing power, an opposing force, then you cannot deviate it or kind of dissolve it, right? You have to do a counteracting action. So think more like information passing, not like a solid seed or an imprint that has a physical stamp on the consciousness, right? So for explanation, there's been used those words, seeds, imprints. Yeah.
This question might sound disrespectful, but I don't mean it that way. A lot of this, what you talked about today, how is it not grasping? So we're supposed to live a virtuous life and we are supposed to let it pass. But a lot of the death-related activity, for the lack of a better word, seems to be as if we want to hold on to what we have or what we have made of this life.
For
Shouldn't
example,
we just let it pass? And so the 4 that you mentioned, for example,
the what?
the word that you
Power.
mentioned.
Power.
So some of these, the meditation around the person who's passing away, etc., etc., all of that seems to be in some ways trying to hold on to something which is anyway transient. It is not something that we can control, but there seems to be a lot of effort being put into controlling where it is going or how it is going to go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's some practices where you don't do anything and you just trust, right? And that's okay. You can do them or not do them, not do anything, right? But if we are still bound within this relative cause and effect, this continuum, we might not do anything and just live our lives doing whatever impulse arises. Like if we want to have an unethical way of life, doing it. And that's okay. I mean, each one of us is responsible of their own actions, and we're going to experience the result because there's cause and effect, whether we like it or not. So, but if we have some inherence and you can cultivate the causes to have a better rebirth or to be free in the moment of death and not having to be bound by cyclic existence and keep taking a samsaric rebirth and experiencing suffering, and you can help others also, why not? Right? If we have that possibility of alleviating suffering, which, suffering from a certain perspective is not inherently existent either. And we might be grasping to it, right? But it's like being in a dream. Imagine you sleep, you're dreaming, and you're lucid in the dream. You know it's a dream. So you don't suffer. If a crocodile eats your hand, you don't care, you know it's a dream, right? But you see a person there that is really suffering because they believe the dream. Then you might want to help them within the dream, even if you know it's a dream, right? Because they don't know it's a dream. So there's practices at different levels. Some practices are for this relative reality, to alleviate suffering, to have more happiness within samsara, to have better conditions so that you can keep practicing, so that you can become lucid in the dream, right? And some practices are working more from the ultimate level, and just accepting everything without grasping. So that's another way of practicing, but might be also difficult for some people. So there's ways for all kinds of practitioners and different paths. That's it. I don't think it's too much. I mean, there might be grasping and there might be duality, but if the motivation is to help and to alleviate suffering and to find happiness, then that grasping eventually will dissolve, because you're putting the conditions more according to reality. You're helping achieve that potential that we have of recognizing Buddha nature, right?